Founder, CEO, and former Olympian Jennifer Sey. She's got the Olympics number and she's got the athletic wear you want to wear. I'm James Polis. Welcome to Zero Hour. Jennifer Sey is a retired 7-time member of the U.S. women's national gymnastics team. She wrote bravely about the abuse in gymnastics and produced the Netflix documentary Athlete A. She worked as the brand president of Levi Strauss and Company, yes, the jeans people, and is now the CEO of her own clothing brand, XXXY Athletics. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me, James.
All right.
Can I say one thing?
Oh, please.
I was not, in fact, an Olympian. I was a national champion and 7-time national team member, but I think my greatest contribution to the sport is whistleblowing on the abuse.
Got it. We will be sure to correct that
That's okay.
in post.
Sorry,
yes.
I don't like to claim, any kind of accolade that I did not.
Well, my real job is to just read the prompter, and whatever's there just comes out of here.
Fine,
and
fine.
I'm slowly
Just
becoming a cyborg in spite of my best efforts.
I don't want to misrepresent myself.
No, I appreciate that. And I don't want to misrepresent XXXY. So the big debate right now, at least in my own head, is what's the difference between athleisure and athletic wear? Because you're doing the latter, right?
Well, I like to say athletic wear, yes. Athleisure is a term, or was a term, that was used very much in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it reflected the turn of events wherein people started to wear, workout clothes in their real life, not for working out. Sort of the leggings are everywhere thing.
The post-COVID wardrobe.
I mean, it sort of started happening before COVID, but it just went bananas and crazy, and no one ever got dressed, and everybody just wore spandex and black leggings all day long. So athleisure represents that trend, and it was always used in the apparel industry. But now it's caught on with regular folks, with everyday people. I like to say athletic wear because athleisure suggests that it's not high performance, and our product is very high quality and very high performance.
Yes, you can personally be very low performance and still wear the athleisure. So
you can be, and you can wear low performance clothing. Like you can wear crappy leggings that bag out, aren't moisture wicking, to lie around and eat Cheetos and watch, Breaking Bad.
Yeah, and I'm told those materials might not always be best for the groin area and various,
you want high quality moisture wicking. If you're going to work out in it, if you're going to binge Netflix, I guess, wear whatever you want.
All right, we'll get to your brand in a minute, which I can't help but notice you are rocking right now. It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
And comfy too, I might
add. It is
comfy.
comfy.
But first, the Olympics.
Yeah.
What is going on here? Have you ever seen anything like this?
I swear I'm going to lose my mind. The spokesperson for the IOC just said this morning there's no reliable test to tell the difference between males and females.
See, because I can think of 4 or 5 fairly reliable, perhaps even 100% accuracy tests.
I mean, is he deliberately obtuse or that stupid? Not to be mean. I mean, I think deliberately obtuse and politically motivated and afraid of the activists. But for somebody to stand up as a spokesperson for the IOC and say, oh, well, there's just no accurate test is... I'm gobsmacked. I don't understand it. And then the other, argument they use is any test we might do is just too intrusive. Well, I will tell you, as an internationally competitive athlete that competed before we didn't think the tests were accurate, we were tested regularly for drug use. Of course, I was competing in the 80s. Steroid use was prevalent. I suspect it still would be if there wasn't really rigorous testing.
Yeah, the Eastern Bloc Olympians were also experimenting with some gender identity as a result of,
Exactly. There was a lot of steroid use in the late 70s and 80s. East German swimmers, lots of suspicion that some of the gymnasts were using as well. And we had to pee in a cup in front of a person at every national and international competition. no one cared about. I didn't even think it was intrusive. I wanted it to be fair. I wanted a fair fight in the competition. I always tell people I lost more than I won. I had a few real lucky days where I, won important competitions, and I can always accept losing if it's a fair fight. So, and I think that the surveys show that something like 85% of female athletes want testing for sex eligibility. Yeah. They do not think it's intrusive because they too want a fair fight.
It's the last line of defense, really.
It's just, so are they going to stop drug testing? Are they going to stop testing for blood doping? Are they just going to, anything goes?
Well, this is, we'll see what happens, but the IOC walked into this controversy. They knew what they were doing. They knew what was going to happen.
Well, they actually snatched the oversight from the International Boxing Association because each of the sports is governed by its own dedicated governing body.
Right.
So World Athletics governs track and field. They made the right decision to keep women's sports and events at the Olympics female. That decision was made by Sebastian Coe, the Olympic runner from many years ago. World Aquatics has made the same decision. And the IBA, I think it's called the IBA, International Boxing Association, determined that Imani Khalif and the other Taiwanese boxer did not pass the sex eligibility tests at the World Championships last year. So they were booted from the competition. They did not challenge the testing results in the court of arbitration, which might suggest they knew
that would be end of story.
That the testing results were accurate. And since then, the IOC has snatched regulation and oversight of boxing away from that individual sports governing body. It's the only sport in the Olympics being governed directly by the IOC. And therefore, these two boxers have been allowed to compete. And I also would point out the second boxer, Lin Yuting, I think is the name, Taiwanese, in his last match, punched repeatedly his opponent in the back of the head. Rabbit punch. I don't know why I'm learning all this about boxing. I really am not that interested. These are illegal even in MMA fighting. Yeah. Because it's so dangerous.
Where two consenting women can beat each other within an inch of their life.
That's right. That's where it's allowed.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have to go into MMA and Fallon Fox, but that was many years ago. So this male boxer punches a woman repeatedly while she's up against the ropes with her throat against the rope in the back of the head. Not disqualified.
Craziness.
I don't know. It's so retrograde. These female boxers are being told, sit down, shut up, take it. This is what you have to do to be inclusive.
Yeah. So one thing that I've noticed really just kind of dominate the whole, not just this discussion, but across kind of all the sort of political culture war stuff.
Yeah.
Is increasingly people who are divided on these issues actually agree on the facts. And one side says, and that's a good thing. And the other side says, and that's a bad thing. And so my question for you is, like, in your community, across the athletic community, what's the split right now between the Olympics is a basket case and that's a good thing versus and that's a bad thing? Is the IOC suffering in its credibility, or is it enough of a tipping point that actually there are people saying, like, oh no, this is how it should be and this is how it's going to be?
Okay, I'm going to take that in two parts. First of all, the IOC has no credibility and hasn't for some time. It's one of the most corrupt organizations that one can imagine. So I find it really hilarious, the commentary, in the social media sphere, talking about the corrupt IAB and how the IOC had to rescue this organization back. I mean, it doesn't take much Googling to find out that the IOC is incredibly corrupt and has been for many decades. Yeah. So that's a joke. So that's the first thing. All these governing sport bodies are, if not, well, I would argue corrupt, and they do not care about the athletes. Yeah. They care about the money they can make from sponsorships. And I would cite USA Gymnastics and the USOPC, which covered up the abuse by Larry Nassar of hundreds and hundreds of young gymnasts for over 30 years. They covered that up because they didn't want the reputational hit. So they let a supposed doctor abuse 12-year-olds for over 30 years. I mean, it's disgusting. These governing bodies don't care about the athletes. And until the athletes stand up and say, we're not going to take it anymore, they don't do anything. They do not do anything until their hand is forced. As far as the question about what do athletes think, 70% of Americans agree that this is ludicrous, that males should not be able to compete in women's sports, no matter the reason, whether they are trans-identified, whether they have what Khalif likely has, a DSD or a difference in sex development. It doesn't matter. But the trans movement brought us, if you say you're a woman, you're a woman. No questions asked, which is what's allowing for this person with what appears to be a DSD compete against women. Most people agree that it's ridiculous. It doesn't feel like most people agree with me when I stand up and say this, because most people are silent. Because you will get dragged across the internet. You will get threatening voicemails. You will get people leaving signs on your front door. You will get, crazy threatening emails and letters. Even.
How much of that is happening to you right now?
The voicemails, 13 in a day.
That's a lot of voicemails at a time when nobody likes to leave voicemails.
Yeah, who talks on the phone and leaves voicemails? I have them blocked now, so it's not a problem. But, I've stood up for things that I care about many times in my life at this point. I was one of the early whistleblowers on abuse in gymnastics, the first one, actually. I was an early dissenter during the COVID years, and that was pretty brutal. But this is like nothing I've experienced. The way that people will come after you, it's rabid. It's cruel. It's nonsensical. Doesn't make any sense.
Going to get worse before it gets better?
It is going to get worse before. I know. I think people, there's little decisions that have gone kind of the way of sanity. The NAIA, which is a sport governing body that actually did do the right thing, they sort of govern collegiate club sports, kind of lower level, below D3. And they made the decision in April to say women's sports are for those born female only, and the men's sports within the NAIA are open. That category is open. Anyone can compete. It's a very common sense, logical decision. And, we cheered for that. The new Title IX rewrite has been blocked in over 20 states. That's a good thing. But it just seems as soon as one thing goes the right direction, the other side pulls even harder. Because like I said, the head of the IOC, or the IOC spokesperson, stood up this morning and said there's just no reliable test. There's just nothing we can do. So we've got to let males compete in women's sports. So I think it's going to be a very long road ahead. I really do.
I'm from LA. The Olympics is coming.
Next one.
They're already starting to make initial preparations and try to make some show of it's not going to look as disgusting and nasty as it does right now.
LA's not going to.
Right. So all this is going to come right home to the U.S. and it's going to be happening on our soil.
I have to believe that truth always outs in the end, and that we will, be gripped with some degree of common sense at some point. But I really do think it's very far away. I think the Title IX decision could have an impact. I think ultimately the USOPC has to make the right decision because the NCAA has said they'll follow their lead. But, the Title IX was rewritten and just sort of snuck in in April by the Biden administration. And basically, Title IX was created to protect women's sex-based rights in the education system. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. And within the rewrite of Title IX, it replaces essentially sex-based rights with gender identity-based rights.
Why do you think so many women have been willing to give that away?
Well, I think we're taught to be sort of inclusive and empathetic, and I think to some extent that's being weaponized against us. Look, I, as a child, went along with decisions made by the adults in my life that went against my own best interest. And I think that girls are that way naturally, and then I think it is, culturally, put upon them, and they want to be nice. We all want to be nice, and except me anymore. I'm done being nice because you cannot ask a woman to put herself in a boxing ring with a male that punches with 162% more force, that punches her in the back of the head and cheats. You cannot ask us to accept that. I thought we've come too far to go back now. And so, I think eventually women will find the courage, screw up the courage and do this, and we'll do it together. But I do think it'll take a long, long time.
I've got something really exciting to share. They say no one reads anymore, but I know that's not true, at least not for this audience. Our best and most important ideas are still captured in print, which is why we've decided to launch a premium quarterly magazine, Frontier. I'm holding the first issue now, and this thing is beautiful. Frontier is packed with thoughtful commentary, stunning photography, and original journalism that highlights the people who refuse to back down. The first issue features work from Matt Taibbi, Chris Rufo, Mark Levin, and Glenn Beck. This isn't just a magazine, we're planting a flag in the ground. I think you're going to love it. But Frontier's just the beginning. As part of our new Blaze Unlimited membership, you'll get exclusive access to Frontier, delivered right to your door, along with a whole lot more. Blaze Unlimited is about taking another step forward, fighting back against state-run media, propaganda, and the forces trying to tear down the foundations of this country. As a founding member of Blaze Unlimited, you'll receive a limited edition founding members card, even more behind-the-scenes content, VIP event access, and, here's the big one, the chance to have your voice heard. We want you to help shape the future of Blaze Media and push back against the mainstream machine that's doing everything it can to silence truth. This membership is about more than just sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively joining the mission to defend free speech and uphold the American way of life. If you're ready to take the next step in this fight, go to blazeunlimited.com/James to claim your spot. But don't wait. Founding member spots are limited because we know this isn't going to be for everyone. Let's stand together, push back, and keep the spirit of America alive. Join Blaze Unlimited today. We're just getting started. Well, women have become more prominent in sports. There's no two ways about that. And also in corporate life, where you have a long track record of success and maybe bumping up against some of these same kinds of issues in different garb. You were with Levi's, rose in the ranks, right there in San Francisco. I'm an East Bay boy, so I always keep one eye on that strange and weird city. And, I'm curious. LA's looking pretty rough right now. San Francisco is a disaster area. I mean, this has been going on for years. It seems like there's no end in sight. Walk us through your experience as someone with the background that you had facing those kinds of controversies around abuse and everything. You kind of exit sports, land in high-powered corporate America. I mean, Levi is one of the classic American brands, globally dominant for a long time, and just watching San Francisco kind of become what it is now.
Oh, that's a lot packed in there. I moved to San Francisco in 1992. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and then I went to school at Stanford. I was very lucky to get to attend Stanford, and that's about a half hour south of San Francisco, and I moved to the city in 1992. And it was the best place I'd ever been. I always say to people, if you ever felt like a weirdo, San Francisco was the place for you. And I was a weirdo. I was a scrawny kid doing gymnastics. I was super nerdy. I was just I always felt like an outcast. I wasn't at school full time. I looked 12 when I was 18. I just didn't really fit in, and I spent my life in the gym. And so, I felt like a weirdo maybe for different reasons than other people that moved to San Francisco, but we were united in our weirdo-ness and being outsiders. And it was amazing. It was before tech boom 1, 2, or 3. So you could live there with 3 roommates and it was affordable in your 20s. I had to eat a lot of hot dogs at, free happy hour nights, but you could do it. You could totally do it. I think my rent was like $250 when I moved there. I lived in the Haight-Ashbury. I would have called myself a left of center Democrat up until COVID, basically.
Wow.
So I loved the free-spirited nature. I loved the hippies. I loved the skaters. I loved the raves. It was rave central in the 90s in San Francisco.
Yeah, still had punks running around.
We had all of it. It was so cool. Slowly but surely, that disappeared and it became tech bros. And that was it. it started to happen in the 90s, but then there was like a bust and it kind of got back its life again. And then in the 2000s, it was just, it became the most utterly conformist place that you can imagine. No, you could not, have one sort of differing thought. I mean, this was really cemented during COVID, but it was happening throughout the 2010s. And there were no interesting people there anymore. It was 35-year-old Google millionaires as far as the eye could see in Teslas. No shade to Elon, but, it just became like this douchey, can I say that, costume.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And then one day
they all wore Airbirds and drove a Tesla and wore khakis and a Patagonia fleece.
And there's still, still lots of those guys, but we also have people in sex cults and blue hairs and trans, polycules and all the rest.
Yes, they're often the same groups. Like if Sam Bankman-Fried is any indication, the polycules and the billionaires.
Well, a lot of that stuff
same.
grew out of these really conformist, really sort of every guy looks the same sort of tech firms.
Right, it's sort of like a pushback against that. Well, I think a lot of the tech people. Now I'm like wandering. Theoretically wandering through the wilderness here, but they were nerdy growing up. These are smart kids, and so now they're sort of the cool kids, right? They have millions of dollars, they're making lots of money, and there's just an arrogance to the city that is gross now. It's just they're so convinced that what they think and how they live is correct, and if anyone challenges it, they're a alt-right, fascist, Christian nationalist, QAnon, whatever. I've been called all these names. Yeah. So they're so convinced, and they never step outside of this bubble except to go to places that they think are, in the middle of the country. But they're places like Sun Valley and Aspen and, these havens for the very, very wealthy. They live in this, they do what CNN tells them to do. If the New York Times has a headline about it, that's what they think. And there are no questions asked about the far left wing of the Democratic Party platform. And so for me, I'd mostly bought into it, although I would like to think that I had always thought for myself and been willing to stand apart and challenge. But COVID just broke any illusion I might have had about the Democratic Party actually standing for the values they said they stood for.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Was it the lockdowns?
Locking me in my house?
The misinformation, sort of punishing? Whatever.
Well, all of it. But literally from day one, my husband and I were like, hell no.
Yeah.
You cannot lock us in our homes. You cannot tell us we can't send our kids to school. I mean, you can. They did.
Yeah, watch us.
But these are the most illiberal anti-freedom policies I can imagine. And they were, executed with the most vim and vigor in deep blue cities and states. I mean, the schools in San Francisco were closed for 19 months, the public schools, all while the very wealthiest screaming out their windows to stay home, to stay safe, were sending their own children to $70,000 a year private schools. The hypocrisy was too much for me to bear.
It was a lot it was people's brains really broke, and you could watch it happen, and you could watch people broken. Sort of losing their will to live almost. I think it was also terrible that many people just don't even want to remember that it happened.
That is the worst. I don't know if it's shame for their own behavior.
Yeah.
I don't actually think they feel shame. I think there's sort of a few camps here. There are the people that forgot that they were the ones yelling at everybody to wear 3 masks and stay home forever. They forgot. Yeah. They saw the light at some point, and they now believe that they were sort of on the right side of it.
They microdosed enough to forget.
Exactly. Yeah. Ayahuasca, I think, is maybe what they have been doing. Or there is a percentage, 10 to 20%, I would argue, that stands by it and still thinks we didn't lock down hard enough. I mean, there's people who will say there were no lockdowns. We couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. I'm like, I don't know what place you lived. I lived in San Francisco where playgrounds were closed for 10 months.
Yeah. No, it was ridiculous.
And the facts are clear when it comes to children, which I think is the thing that enraged me the most, because children are the most vulnerable among us.
Yeah, they invented a new way to abuse kids.
Many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Lock them in their homes, double mask a toddler who's learning to speak, make them sit 10 feet apart at lunch outside in the rain to keep us safe, all while adults are going to bars, packed stadiums, strip clubs in San Francisco, sex clubs for your polycule.
Mm-hmm.
That's all happening while children can't go to school, and then when they do, experience such disrupted schooling that no learning could possibly occur.
Right. Yeah. And now you look at San Francisco, and where are the kids?
Well, they're
gone.
gone. Yeah, it's a good point. And San Francisco always had the lowest percentage of children of any major city. It's not very child-friendly, as you might imagine. Yeah. It's a playground for the rich. Mm-hmm. Who don't have children, or maybe have one that they pay a lot of money for very late in life, and treat sort of like an accessory, and kind of farm out all the labor to staff.
Yes. Vanity trans kid.
Yeah. So it's a very, very low percentage of children, and an even lower percentage that attend public schools. Mm-hmm. So lowest percentage of kids in public schools in the country as well. So what do these people care about public school children, 60% of whom are at or below the poverty line?
Right.
They didn't care. But what makes me the most angry is these are the people that tell you we're the good ones, we're the caring ones, we're the lefties, we want to lift everybody up, while putting a boot on their neck, essentially.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you're going through this having been at Levi's, one of the great American brands, that really globally dominant in many ways. What could be more American than blue jeans? And just really, I always go back and remember like the "Oh Pioneers" ad that Levi's did. And it was
Can we talk about that ad?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. That ad is probably the reason I became the CMO. Not probably. It is the reason I became the chief marketing officer, because it was such a failure. And you remember it.
That's crazy.
Isn't it funny? It did so poorly.
It didn't look like a failure.
It was an awful failure. Nobody liked it. It was dark and dirty and not very stylish. And the brand had been like this for a really long time. And it was grungy and angry and disaffected, and it was a failure. And we had a relatively new CEO at the time, and he knew that we were aligned in terms of what we thought the brand should be and could be. And so he tapped me and asked me to move into the chief marketing officer role. And I will also tell you, the last time I was here, 2 times ago, I was on Glenn Beck's show, and he also raised this ad with me. And he said, I have beef to pick with you because you did that ad. And that's what made me want to start my own denim brand, on which I lost a ton of money.
Unbelievable.
And I said, your beef is not with me. I hated that ad.
I don't know. Maybe, I'm a disaffected East Bay guy.
Were you a creative in an ad agency?
No, never made it into an ad agency. I had a roommate who was at Ogilvy for a while.
Okay. The ad agency creatives all cite that ad as like one of the best of all time. And it's really hard to describe how bad it was for business.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It felt like really authentic and inspiring at the time. And maybe that was just a function of kind of where I felt like the rest of the culture was at. But what's interesting to me now, having sort of come of age in the 90s or whatever, is there's this huge 90s resurgence. And there's this big wave. You see it in the fashion. It's not just the denim, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And, seeing like teenagers dressed like it's the 90s and like talking like it's kind of like a weird simulation moment for me.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is, just beyond that generational sort of, revisitation, there is an overarching kind of spirit of like longing now taking place in America. You saw it with the little discourse around the Olympic uniforms, the Ralph Lauren, it's like, yes, like classic Americana, like where did it go? It can't just be Lana Del Rey. Like we need to bring this energy back. I don't know. Did you feel like,
I don't observe that right now. In fact, I feel like there's a real kind of not very subtle hatred of America, in which case, why would you
certainly dominant. But, I do think that sort of people who are old enough to remember that it wasn't always this way and don't feel some kind of weird spiritual guilt leading them to feel like,
maybe we need to bring it back.
Need to destroy America. Right. That longing to bring it back, the longing for like, this was going through like the Victoria's Secret discourse and the Abercrombie discourse. Where it was like, can't we just have like good looking people who are athletic, like showing us kind of an example of how we can live our everyday lives?
Yeah. We always take things too far. I mean, I'll address directly the body positivity movement, which definitely has informed the brands that you just mentioned, Victoria's Secret, and their choices, which have not been successful for them. Look, I don't think it was great, in the 80s and 90s that as a young girl, the image I saw in advertising everywhere, film, entertainment, of what it was to be an attractive woman was, 5'10" and 102 pounds. That was not a healthy image. I was
fairly unattainable
for most people. And I was anorexic more from the sport than from that. But I thought it was a really good thing when in the early 2010s, sort of the body positivity movement hit the scene. And Dove, the brand, I think really took that mainstream with their Real Beauty campaign. I thought it was really positive. It was sort of real looking women, attractive, unretouched, different body shapes. That was really positive. Cut to 10 years later, and you have people that weigh 450 pounds on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue.
Right.
Why did we have to take it that far?
Right.
And we have, healthy at any size. No, that's as big of a lie as the IOC spokesperson saying there's just no reliable test for male and female. And I can't believe the culture embraces these lies. It's such a disservice to people to say you at 400 pounds will have no health impacts based on this.
Fantasy.
It's a fantasy. And look, every person has value. We shouldn't be cruel. We shouldn't be mean. But I think it's cruel to pretend that person will have a long life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in LA, I've seen this like darkly comic trend unfold where, young-ish or young women, friends, colleagues who are kind of in that social media influencer world, they're like, I'm too fat to be a model on the internet, but I'm not fat enough to be a model on the internet. So like, where's the representation for just like, you go back to the 90s and it wasn't all supermodels. There was this, you could be a kind of like normal person and be seen as someone who is fashionable, someone who is beautiful, someone who is charismatic. And that's kind of like been polarized away.
But you had, at the same time, you had, Abercrombie on the rise. It was very sort of Aryan chic, I might call it.
Yes.
And there were all sorts of lawsuits because, he only hired people that looked like the people in the ads, and you were ruled out automatically if you were black or if you weighed more than 100 pounds. Not great.
No question.
So that brand then took a hit, as they should have. And yet then they come back trying to chase the current trend of, body positivity. It's just like, what are we doing? Why can't we just be normal?
Yeah.
Why can't we be normal?
How much of this do you think is, not ideological only, but is just kind of this weird psychosis that large corporations get into where...
Oh, well, all of it in the culture is ideological, I believe. I think what's happening in corporations, I call it woke capitalism. Most of these companies, these fashion companies, are coastal. They're New York, San Francisco, LA. You've got some in the Pacific Northwest, Nike, et cetera. You've got some in the Northeast, like a lot of the shoe brands are up there. But they're all coastal. And I think this idea, it used to be greed was good. Now, it was, you could be revered for having lots of money, and everybody assumed you were a Republican if you went into business. That was just the assumption. Well, now privilege is bad. And so all of these corporate leaders are disavowing their privilege, and they're pretending they never went into it for the money. They went into it because this is how they could affect change.
Yes.
And they're lying to themselves. They believe it. Although the money's always going to trump the change. So that's when this is all going to shift, when they stop making money. They're also trying to please their kids. Their kids go to these $70,000 a year private schools where everyone's a they. and their kids are very woke, and they would be critical of their parents for holding these jobs if their parents didn't also pretend to be social justice warriors. But the kids also want all the privileges that come with the job. So everybody's just a big hypocrite.
Right.
Now, a lot of people believe the companies are sort of incentivized to do this by the BlackRocks of the world. That may be true, but at the end of the day, those people want to make money too.
Yeah.
This is just a big money make. It's a marketing strategy.
Well, and we've seen, ESG, that's rolled back.
ESG is rolling back.
We'll see how far it goes.
DEI is starting to roll back.
Yeah.
I mean, even before DEI was sort of aggressively and overtly removed from some organizations, those people were getting laid off right and left.
Yeah.
Because when the companies are struggling and they have to cut costs, the first place they look is headcount. And the first area they look is, are you generating revenue? And I will tell you, HR, more broadly, is not generating revenue.
Right.
They're just going around and policing your language and making you do all these weird trainings. That's it. So they're actually the opposite of generating revenue, because they're taking you away from your actual job to sit in trainings about how not to be racist.
Yeah.
So those people have been getting laid off anyway. But now companies are actually overtly saying, we're not doing this anymore. Small, but it's happening. And then you have the Bud Lights and the Targets of the world, who again are just quietly rolling back some of the marketing efforts around pride and, and all of these things, because they took a hit to the wallet. Look, Bud Light went from the #1 share beer brand to number 3.
Number 3. Yeah.
Because
Modelo's on top now.
Modelo's on top, and who's next? Miller, Coors.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
The other leading brand is number 2.
Yeah. And then Target, which is, had a pride campaign for many, many years, and we did too at Levi's. And everybody was fine with rainbow T-shirts. Everybody was fine with that. I don't think anybody cared at all. Yay. Everybody's included. That was fine. But when they did a product collection featuring, tuck-friendly bathing suits for young women, parents were like, yeah, no, I've had enough now. And it did impact their bottom line. And they pulled way back this year. So it's a much more anodyne, or it was in June, a much more anodyne collection. And it wasn't even in all stores. But they're never going to admit they pulled back because it hit the bottom line. No one's going to admit it, because then it proves they never cared about that shit anyway, that it was all a marketing strategy. So I think a lot of companies will start to quietly pull back. But it's just important to remember, these people, they live in such a bubble. I mean, if I go back to the Bud Light scenario, what was the Alyssa, I can't remember her last name, the VP of marketing. I mean, she said, this is a Ivy League trained, New York denizen. Everybody she knows agrees with her. She doesn't really think beyond whatever headline she read in the New York Times to question or challenge anything. And she said a few days before that Dylan Mulvaney campaign ran, she said, we don't like our current customer. He's fratty and kind of a jerk. I'm paraphrasing. So we're going to get a new one.
Paraphrasing slightly.
Yeah. Not a ton.
Right.
We're going to get a new one. I mean, first of all, that you would feel empowered to say something like that and be critical of your consumers who hand good money over to buy your product. And then to actually do it, just dismiss them and, install a new kind of marketing approach meant to appeal to a new consumer, your friends, who are never going to drink this garbage beer anyway.
Right. Yeah. Are you still in San Francisco?
No, I live in Denver.
There you go.
Which is also very blue, but
it is.
It feels very sane to me. There's a real libertarian streak in Colorado, like a live and let live.
Yeah. Anywhere there are mountains, it can only get so, airy.
Yeah. I mean, our governor, he's turned the state deep, deep blue.
Yeah.
I would also argue he was the best Democratic governor during COVID. I mean, we moved there during COVID just so that our kids could go to school.
Yeah, that's important, and it buys officials a lot of goodwill.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to hate on Polis. I mean, I don't like some of what he does, but I'm not going to hate on him. We literally chose it because the schools were open.
Yeah. So you're out of Levi's, you're out of San Francisco. All of that you've described really amounts to there's an opening. There's an opening for new entrants into whether it's fashion, whether it's sort of sports and entertainment. The legacy players, some of them are still around. Some of them are still just kind of cycling through these weird internal struggles about ideology. You are stepping forward with XXXY. And you are kind of wearing your corporate identity on your sleeve, like literally.
I am. So I resigned from Levi's in the spring of 22, in February of 22, and I just sort of took a break. I felt literally chased out of San Francisco. Friends I had had for 30 years don't speak to me anymore because I said schools need to be open.
Yeah.
That was enough.
That was it.
Yeah. That was the nail in my coffin. I think it's funny. I'm too horrible to talk to. And, it used to upset me a lot until I had the realization, you know what, I think you're horrible because you sent your kid to private school while screaming at everybody else, the poor people, that they were not allowed to. So I'm going to flip this on you a little bit because I actually disapprove of your actions. So there, we're even.
Yeah.
So I took a little break. I wrote a book. I'm making a movie called Generation COVID, so it wasn't really much of a break as you might imagine. And then I decided, okay, it's time to get back to work. I have to work. I have 4 kids. I'm the breadwinner in the family. And I started interviewing at large companies, big established brands, CEO roles.
Yeah.
And I was asked in one interview with an $8 billion company if I was willing to apologize for what I'd done.
Of course.
And I was like,
which was what exactly?
Excuse me?
Which was leave San Francisco during COVID?
No, it was advocate. I was against lockdowns and closed schools. That required an apology.
Right.
Yeah. In her mind, I was an anti-masker, anti-vaxxer, whatever their names are. And she asked if I would apologize publicly. Now, this was my 8th interview out of 8. It was the last one. She was the HR representative,
of course.
Not surprisingly.
Right.
And this was 2023. Like, we knew that the closed schools were both ineffective and harmful at this point.
Oh, yeah. No, the science was settled.
Yeah, the science was settled on this. There had been headlines in the New York Times telling us it was okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
It was now permitted to say learning loss is real. Poor children, Black children, those, disproportionately in public schools were harmed the most. We were allowed to say all these things now, but an apology was required from me. And I was, a little flummoxed, but I realized in that moment that the apology was really about not reading the script that I was given.
Right.
And you don't get to be an executive in legacy corporations if you don't read the script.
That's right.
And I'd never read the script. I always, I've written 2 books. I wrote them myself. People always ask me, who ghost wrote it? No one. I sat and I did the work. I write my own speeches, emails. And it sounds crazy, but I don't think I know another executive, and I know a lot of them, that write their own talks, that write their own even emails.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say emails, I don't mean like the casual jot one off, but like to the sales force. They don't write those themselves.
How long do you think that can last, that culture of just like complete CEO disconnect and just kind of like, robotically performing the duties, and meanwhile your soul is somewhere else entirely?
I think it can last. I do.
We're about to find out.
I don't really believe in karma.
Yeah.
I think it can last. But I do think there will be companies that set themselves apart because of a clear vision from not just the CEO, but the other leaders in the organization, and a real passion and connection to, and it doesn't have to be a cause. I mean, it could just be a product that they feel really passionate about making amazing. I mean, and so I just think those companies are going to set themselves apart.
Yeah.
But I think there's always going to be room for, look, to make it in corporate America, you don't really have to be that good at anything. You have to sort of be able to kind of go invisibly through the hallways and never offend anyone.
Right.
And then you're the last man standing.
Right.
That's most people. I mean, I don't care. These are my people. I spent 35 years around them. These, and I did not just work at Levi's. I worked at the Gap for 3 years, and I worked at a very large ad agency before that. They're chameleons. They don't know what they think. They don't really have opinions. They think what they're told to think, and they don't ever offend anyone. And they say stuff that is supposed to seem profound, like, I don't know, we need to take a step back and stare this down and not rush to make a decision. I mean, they get ahead by never making a decision.
Really backwards.
That's how they get ahead.
Yeah.
Because if you never make a decision, you can't be held accountable for anything.
Right. So
this is Kamala too. Sorry.
Right. No, this is good. She's the embodiment
I've
of
been
this.
thinking about this lately because everybody's so, her word salads, everybody's, cutting together these videos and splashing them all over the place online. Like, oh, it's so funny. She doesn't make any sense. It's by design.
Yeah.
If you don't say anything and you don't make any commitments, you can't be held to account. It's on purpose. It's not stupidity. It's purposeful.
Yeah. That's diabolical. Okay, so that was...
Sorry, I got off track.
No, this is good. So that was door number 1, 8 interviews, top companies.
Yes.
You looked at door number 1 and you're like, I'm going to do door number 2.
That's right. And I thought, well, I'll probably never get a job in a big company anyway. I'm certainly not going to bend a knee the way they're asking me to bend a knee. I guess I'm going to have to start my own thing, which was not, what I had in mind for the last 10, 15, 20 years of my career. I'm 55. This is not what I thought I would be doing.
Yeah.
I liked working in an existing corporate structure. And even though most people are the kind that I said, if you're not that, you can set yourself apart unless you push too hard and have too many opinions.
And then they take you out behind the barn.
Yeah. So I realized corporate America was not very fond of me because I deviated from the script, and I had this idea because I was so distraught by this woke capitalism that I described because it's so phony.
Yeah.
It's just so phony. And
phonies are welcome if you say the words.
Yeah. But there's, people in the organization that feel left behind by it. There's consumers that feel, pushed away by it, but they don't feel like they have any other choices for any other products to buy. So I thought if I could take my background as an athlete, a high-level athlete, a fashion executive for one of the most beloved brands in the world, make great product, and my penchant for being willing to say things that are true but perhaps inconvenient, maybe there's a brand there.
Maybe so.
So I thought of this with a friend of mine who now works with the company, Brett Craig, and we thought of this idea for a brand that really stands up for female athletes. Because all these brands out there like Nike, they do Women's History Month campaigns. They pretend to stand up for women athletes, but no one will touch this issue with a 10-foot pole.
Okay, so XXXY.
Yeah.
Chromosomes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what do you got? You got the jacket, which you're wearing now.
Yeah,
is a full line?
Yeah, it's a tight line because we're getting started, We want to see what works before we grow. So, we launched March 25th, so it's really only 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah,
Didn't realize.
it's super new.
Got it.
We launched with cotton product, graphic tees, sweats like I'm wearing, this sweatshirt. And then we quickly followed that up with performance products. So we have leggings and bike shorts and moisture-wicking fabrics for men and for women. Mostly women. It's about 70-30 men's, women's. Although men are leaning in.
Yeah, for sure.
They want it too because it's really about asserting what is true and refusing to kind of further the lie that there is no accurate test to determine who is male and female. Men want to weigh in on that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for a lot of people who are interested in sort of shopping that space, it feels like their door number 1 is the big domestic corporate companies, and door number 2 is like, order it from China, open the bag, smell the toxic chemicals. It falls apart in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So you're offering something just at that level that's totally different.
Yeah. And I guess what we're doing is generally grouped in the parallel economy. Have you heard this term?
Oh, yeah.
I don't like the term because it suggests we're like second-class citizens.
Right.
I'm not parallel. I'm just in the economy. And there's a lot of Americans, more than 50%, that agree with us that women's sports should be for women only. So how am I the parallel? If you don't think that, you're parallel.
Right.
So I sort of reject the term. I know a lot of my kind of brands in my space embrace it. I guess it feels a little rebellious.
A little bit.
I don't know. So I just...
Perpendicular economy. That would really be what it was.
I just demand to be... I just don't want to be relegated to the corner. Nobody puts baby in a corner. We're making world-class products. I think world-class marketing. And it's a message that resonates with people. So there's nothing parallel about it. I do think there are a lot of brands in this parallel economy space that have seen a opportunity to appeal to those who feel pushed away by the mainstream, but they aren't making world-class products.
Right. And so, I think customers, would-be customers, the hesitancy there is, how do I know this thing's actually good? How do I know it's good enough?
It's a good question.
And, you've got the pedigree, and you've not just on the athletic side, but also on the apparel side.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, it's not a gimmick. We took our time to develop the product. Well, we went really fast, but we were very disciplined about the standards that we were going to uphold. Not just in terms of the quality and the fit and the feel or the hand feel of the product, but where we make the product as well. Although it's not in the USA, and I'll explain that if you want me to, because some people get mad at us for that. But the people that get mad at us for that are the haters. They're just trying to look for something anyway. But yeah, it's a terrific product. And people, once they try it, because they may have that hesitation, right? You might feel like, ugh, Lulu doesn't align with my values, but what choice do I have? The leggings are great, But once our returns are less than 5%, which is incredibly low for a women's apparel brand available only online.
Absolutely.
Average is like 25 to 30%. So I think they try the product. They come to us for the mission of the brand. They stay because the product is really outstanding.
So where can they find the clothes? And where can they find you?
So our website is xx-xyathletics.com, or you can use our vanity URL, which is thetruthfits.com. I have my own website, sayeverything.com.
SEY.
SEY, that's my name. Yeah, and my own Substack, which I'm delinquent on right now. But I tend to write a lot
That's
for
the
it.
point of having a Substack, right? Is to always be delinquent.
That's true. I'm pretty good. I've been asked to write a lot of stuff for other outlets, so that's why I'm falling behind on my own. So anyway, but yeah, it's going really well. We're only 4 months in. People seem to really like it. I'm excited. Somebody told me before I launched the brand, your best day is going to be so much better than any day you ever had at a company owned by someone else, and your worst day is going to be so much worse. And that is all 1,000% true.
A trade worth taking, though, right?
I love it. I'm having the time of my life. And I'm never having an HR department. That's my commitment to my employees.
Amen. Well, huge congratulations.
Thank you.
Jennifer Sey, we'll be watching and we'll be shopping.
Awesome. Thanks, James.
All right. That's all the time we got. Till next time around, I'm James Polis. This is Zero Hour. May God have mercy on us all.